Shortly after Katrina Banks was shot dead by her husband, he admits to cops he pulled the trigger during a heated argument.
So I went bop, bop, bop. I think it was 3. And I noticed it got quiet.
Ironically, just days before the tragic event, Alvin was photographed with the gun holstered around his shoulder and a t-shirt reading, "Keep calm." As he's grilled by cops at the hospital, Alvin Banks is anything but calm, insisting the killing was an accident, claiming the bullet that ended Katrina's life was only intended to end their argument.
Could you see her when you were shooting the rounds? Could you?
Yeah, I was looking at her. I was shooting that straight up because it was just a getaway, stop, bang.
Investigators weren't buying it. Alvin's hot-headed moment would soon carry serious consequences.
Mr. Banks was arrested the night of the incident and charged with second-degree murder.
And after a close look at the evidence,
we were able to elevate the charge from second degree to first degree.
Alvin Banks was also charged with using a firearm to commit a felony, unlawful discharge of a firearm inside a home, and 2 counts of child endangerment.
What were the endangerment charges based on?
The idea that these children were in the home, in close proximity to their mother at the time that she was killed.
Charges his own lawyers knew would be a challenge to fight.
One of those bullets went through the wall, down into the basement, and lodged in the wall inches above baby's head.
But as for the charge of first-degree murder,
a plea deal from the beginning with this case was out of the question for you and your client.
Exactly, and we told them there will be no plea to a murder charge. None. Don't even bring it to us.
You were standing strong.
We had a strong case.
You believed your client?
Did.
Wholeheartedly?
Yeah.
The prosecution was just as confident.
How did the charge of second-degree murder get elevated to first-degree murder, and why?
The difference between a first-degree murder and a second-degree murder is the premeditation and the forethought before pulling the trigger. Our theory was that not only was this firearm brought in to perhaps threaten and stop the argument, but actually to stop Katrina and killed her.
Alvin Banks was held without bail for nearly a year until his trial got underway.
When we were picking the jury, we asked them, just because my client fired the gun in the house and a bullet ultimately killed wife, are you automatically already going to convict him? And we tried to select a jury that would be open-minded to this.
During opening statements, defense attorney Joe Morrissey told jurors why Alvin Banks was not guilty of first-degree murder.
Number 1, you've got to shoot intend to kill. Number 2, you've got to do it with malice. That means a bad heart, mean-spirited way. And just because you shoot in the house, which shows anger, which shows frustration, doesn't equate with malice.
Shannon Taylor is the Commonwealth's attorney for Henrico County.
The idea of anyone bringing a firearm into an argument to suggest that some action is accidental is simply just not logical.
The case largely came down to flying bullets and their trajectories. Both sides agreed that 3 of the 5 bullets fired by Alvin were shot into the ceiling. The defense argued the other 2 were fired into the floor.
One we know did because it went down in the basement.
That bullet lodged into the wall just above the couple's 2-year-old daughter, who was asleep in her bed.
The question then became, where's the 5th bullet?
Prosecutors argued it was fired straight into the door leading downstairs, going directly through Katrina Banks' shoulder. But defense attorney James Maloney told jurors the evidence proves otherwise.
There were a few points of the forensics that I thought were particularly important, just as their evidence laid out.
Such as?
Well, first of all, the bullet itself that everyone agreed was the fatal shot had a dent in it.
He argued that dent was proof the bullet had ricocheted off of something. Maloney says in court the prosecution's own expert agreed.
Second, there was a hole in the door. Not just a hole, though, it was elongated. Their own expert agreed that that type of hole could very well be caused by a tumbling bullet rather than one that was traveling straight on.
And third, the bullet wound in Katrina's shoulder.
Another one of their experts, the medical examiner, by looking at the shape of the entry wound, she conceded that it was a reasonable possibility that that bullet, rather than passing straight through, was passing through because it was tumbling.
Alvin's lawyers were so confident the evidence would clear their client, they didn't even put him on the stand.
There was nothing that he could add to the case. We said, why do we put him on? They already had his statement.
Instead, the 18-minute interrogation by Enrico police detectives was played for the jury.
I shot that straight up in the air. I don't know, it must have hit something and ricocheted down.
Prosecutors pointing out Alvin's extensive weapons training as an ex-Marine as proof he intended to kill his wife that night.
If he is the experienced marksman that he is asserting himself to be, he should know how to handle a firearm in a responsible manner.
In firing it into the house?
Is absolutely irresponsible.
Irresponsible? Yes, but does it rise to the level of first-degree murder? In the end, those 12 jurors said no in a big way, finding him not guilty of murder, even refusing to convict on a possible lesser charge.
The jury could have given the lightest offense, manslaughter, and they chose not to even do that.
For Katrina's family, it was a devastating blow.
What went through your mind when you heard the verdict acquitted Alvin Banks?
After I heard the first one, I was already gone.
You were out of there.
I was gone.
How did you get him off?
My partner and I felt from the very beginning that if we could show the jury that there was anger involved, but the anger wasn't directed towards, I am going to kill wife, but rather, I'm going to do something dumb like fire a gun inside the house, that they would be opened to our theory of what happened.
The jury did find Alvin Banks guilty on the 2 child endangerment counts and unlawful discharge of a firearm inside a home. In January, he was sentenced to 16 months behind bars, then released the next day because of time served. And now Alvin Banks is speaking with Crime Watch Daily in his first TV interview.
You know there's a risk with speaking out, with talking.
Absolutely.
Up next,
You told detectives that you wanted to choke Katrina.
Right.
You were outraged.
Yes.
You were very heated.
Absolutely.
Isn't that how murders take place?
So I followed behind her. As I turned to go down the steps, I saw my .45, and I just grabbed it. I shut off rounds.